Welcome back to 30 at 6, Cecil County and the world. Before I introduce our next guest, and I'm flabbergasted that I mentioned his name in the previous segment and he actually showed up, made my night. But before I introduce our next guest, the town of Elkton is about ready to enter another phase of development. South of Elkton on 213, in the old area of Frenchtown, there's going to be a multi-use area, lots of homes, new businesses, and here to tell us all about the history of that area, and we'll discuss some of the new developments, is my good friend, Mike Dixon. Mike, welcome.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's always our pleasure. You know, I gave up on trying to keep up with you with the bow tie thing. I only had one, and I wore it last
sure,
time.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, a role model for the entire world.
Absolutely.
And yeah, our previous guest talked about you as you're coming to the 55
Had nice things to say?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, okay.
The 55 Plus Expo, you're going to be doing a presentation there.
Thursday. Learning how to do genealogy. Are you interested?
I am. I've been told that I'm 256th Penobscot Indian on my mom's family side from Massachusetts.
Well, why don't you come and join us? Well, maybe we'll figure it out for you.
Well, I'm doing a little research of my own, Mike. I'm going to Colorado. I can't say any more about it.
This is a secret mission, huh?
Family research.
Family research. Okay.
Other.
Good. Well, good.
Anyway,
that sounds like fun.
So, speaking of research and digging into the past, we know there's a new development in Frenchtown, which is south of Elkton.
South of Elkton,
on Pennsylvania Navy Highway. So, what's going on down there?
Well, Rob, of course, they just, the Mayor Alt and the County Executive McCarthy and the Economic Development Department and the developer have announced a rather large project that will bring a lot of change to Elkton. It's an area that has been in the radar of developers for, I guess, for decades. So it's kind of exciting to see that they've got someone who is now interested with what at this introductory level, or based on what you read in the newspaper, sounds like an exciting project for us. So, and they do have an interesting parcel of land to work with.
I've heard 700 homes, multi-use athletic fields and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Did I hear an ice rink? Did I hear that?
I'm not sure about that.
Pool, maybe?
But they are looking at some sports complex. I don't know the details.
That's awesome.
But it's and different developers have looked at it over the years. So there's a lot going on in the county right now.
And it eventually abuts the banks of the Elk River, right?
It does. It does.
How about that? So what about the old Frenchtown? How did they get the name of Frenchtown, that area?
Okay. So the property they're looking at, Rob, is the entire parcel. I mean, it stretches from along the head of the Elk River, just south of Elk Landing and Landing Lane there to cross 213. It's really, in terms of like cultural resources and things, it's got some of the most rich resources, and so it's really a place that's got a lot of history. I mean, history is no stranger in that parcel. So. And I'm sure they'll take that into consideration as they develop it.
The only thing I know about it, they called it Frenchtown. I guess people from France moved there or something.
Mm-hmm.
And they had I see the plaque as I drive by.
So you did know something about it.
There was a railroad there.
There was. So early on, Acadians moved there and settled there, and thus and this is like really early, Rob, it gives you the name Frenchtown, and it just stuck and has come down to today. As you go down that highway, what was the name of that highway you get stuck on?
The Pennsylvania Navy Highway.
That one.
Route 213.
Or Augustine.
It's only during boating season.
Or Augustine Herman Highway.
Right.
And you pass Frenchtown Road. So here's a name that's come down from, the top of the 1700s or something like that. A little further down the road, you pass a historical marker. It says Newcastle and Frenchtown Railroad.
Yeah.
And if you turn up any of those roads, today, because it's in private property, you can't really get to the end of it. But there was a lost Cecil County village there that was really prosperous for decades. You figure, say, the top of the 1800s, late 1700s, decades into the 1800s, boy, the great and the near great knew that tiny little village. They may have not have known about Elkton, but they knew Frenchtown.
How about that?
Because they were traveling. So as like, I don't know, Daniel Boone goes through there at one point. Daniel Webster. Anybody who was traveling, say, from Boston into Washington, D.C., Philadelphia to New York, that was your highway.
So, of course, it goes. You had to cross the Elk. There was probably a ferry, maybe.
Yes. So that's really what it was. It was like before we had like railroads, it was a portage route across the Chesapeake Bay, across the Delmarva Peninsula, and so you would take a steamboat from Baltimore, and you'd come up as far as you could up the Elk River, and there was this little village of Frenchtown. You get off the steamboat. Now, this is steam. I mean, this is like modern technology for the time we're talking about. And when you got off the steamboat, there was the region's first railroad sitting there waiting for a locomotive. It was called the Newcastle and Frenchtown. You would get on that railroad for a quick 14-mile journey across to Newcastle. And when you arrived in Newcastle, there was another steamboat waiting to, or packet, depending on where we are in time, a boat waiting to take you up to Philadelphia. So when we didn't travel far from our homes, you figure the people that went through that little village. There was a tavern that survives into the 1950s, 1960s,
Wow.
Frenchtown Tavern, warehouses, a few homes, all sorts of, there was a lot for a little parcel. It's almost, you wouldn't believe there was anything there if you didn't know the historical record.
No, I've never been down that road. I've been down the next road, Lewis Shore Road.
Mm-hmm.
We had friends that had a cottage and a boat down there, and we
Yeah.
used to go water skiing. Of course, nowadays, you'd have to water ski at high tide because you come back, it'd be this much water
Yeah.
and that much mud,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
years ago. So I guess the river was deeper, cleaner, less sediment.
Yeah, all of the above. You figure we say to 1800, we're not disturbing the soil so much, Rob, so that when those Pennsylvanians get the rain, all that dirt and debris comes down the river, deposits there, kind of silts it in. So, silting it as the 1800s went on became a substantial problem, and today you wouldn't even know there was riverboat traffic there. But it was 1813 that the first steamboat, the Eagle, landed on our shore at Frenchtown.
Wow.
So
And it was the railroad wasn't there yet.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it was.
Well. So here's the story. It was always a place of innovation. Before there was a railroad, there was a turnpike company. So, very top of 1800s, there was a company called the Newcastle and Frenchtown Turnpike. So instead of the locomotive, the steam locomotive, what you had meeting the packet boats probably at that point were coaches, and you'd unload your
Like
baggage.
stagecoaches.
Yeah, stagecoaches, and they'd rest. And the difference was it was like an improved road, not a country farm lane
Right.
and stuff like that. And it wasn't owned by the government. It was a stockholder corporation, so you could have owned stock in it. You maintained it. The stagecoaches, passers-by, and then about 1831, the times are changing, and the steam locomotive has appeared in North America. The B&O is the first, or one of the first. You've got one down in South Carolina, and our little Newcastle and Frenchtown was the first in Delmarva,
Wow.
probably the third in the nation.
Wow.
So you'd jump on that little packet and go right past Bullfrog and the Mason-Dixon line. In fact, that's another archaeological resource that I'm sure they'll look at. If you get off, you said you'd gone down to Lewis Shore.
Right.
Can you picture where there's a little creek just as you get off of Augustine Herman Highway?
Mm-hmm.
There's a little creek there. Now you won't see it because you're probably bustling right on to your
Right.
destination down by the water. But if you park your car, there's this a fieldstone bridge span over a tiny creek that was built by these Irish laborers circa 1820s.
Wow.
And today, the county got its money's worth out of it because it's still a county road bridge.
How
So
about
think
that?
of the craftsmanship that went in to do that. And they'll probably have to look at all those things. What else is down there? So, if you had to bury somebody in the top of the 1800s, you didn't take them to large commercial community cemeteries or church cemeteries. You probably had a cemetery in your plantation. You get back in the woods there, and you will find at least one cemetery. Now it's deeply overgrown, about where you, like you were talking about when you get down to the end. And there's not much sunlight peeks in there today, but if you know where you're going, you'll go poking along in there and you'll see some of the oldest tombstones in Cecil County history with names like Henderson.
You've got me intrigued, Mike. I think I ride my bicycle down that way a lot. I think you could probably ride your bicycle down that road.
You can, yeah, you can almost to the end. Right at the end, it's owned by and private property now, and so you can't get in through there. But yeah, it's worth driving down through there. You'll see 1950s modern homes, but otherwise a lot of that's just farm fields, which I assume the developer is going to be working on.
So, what do you think should, from a historical perspective, I got two questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
First, what do you think should be preserved from a historical perspective as they develop?
Well, I'm sure the town planning department and county planners and other regulatory agencies involved will be very careful. There's a pretty rigorous process. Like, I am sure they will protect the cemetery. There are regulations about that, and usually a developer just has to set it off and care for it. Today, you really hardly anybody can find it unless they'd been in there before. The old stones rarely see somebody. There's, even on a bright day like yesterday with the sunlight, there's not much sunlight gets in there. So I suppose, and we'll have to wait and see what the regulatory reviews do and things, but I suppose they'll do that. I suppose they'll probably do some archaeological studies because, there's all these transportation potential artifacts to be studied. The village, one of the Cecil County battles occurred there. In that village, yeah. War of 1812. The British are at the head of the bay, and in late April of 1813, they sail up to attack Elkton. They run into a fort right there at Frenchtown. There's 200 Royal Marines up against a local militia who probably has Revolutionary War gun. They said the stagecoachmen there, they quickly come ashore, they disperse the defenses, and they retreat back to Elkton to make a second stand. You do have a skirmish there, a little bit of a battle.
Right.
So, what's the history of that? I guess it was probably 10 years ago, the state of Maryland was here, the Maryland Historical Trust, the state agency that oversees these things, and they had an underwater archaeologist, and they and a couple of graduate students did dives right off that area that we're talking about. They came up with artifacts from when the British burned the ships.
Are these artifacts on display at the Historical Society?
They're at the Patterson Park Lab. It's the Maryland State Archaeological Lab, and you can check with them and see them there. From our standpoint, what they do, Rob, is they give us reports. Written records are one thing; it's the way you know things, but you also need the objects, the relics that survive. So they were able to find buttons from British soldiers, buttons maybe from sailors. They can see what kind of food they were eating, where the structures were and stuff like that. Now, the only detailed study that's been done there was in the water. And the state archaeologists were here. I guess they spent a couple weeks, and they would go and dive. And they had a couple of graduate students from a university in North Carolina. But I suppose what we'll hear is that all of this is being taken into consideration.
Sure.
And it's a standard process.
And I'm sure the measures will be taken to protect and maintain the health of the elk with sediment control and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly, I would think so, yeah.
And a runoff management plan so there's not too much blacktop going right down.
Blacktop?
Yeah.
No.
Macadam.
Oh, macadam.
Going right down to the water. You know.
Yeah, Pennsylvania dirt's what gets us. It comes down there and fills up the creek.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mentioned the Historical Society. You're a historian through the Historical Society. Also teach at Cecil College. Also lifelong learning instructor at the Expo, 55 Plus Expo. Coming up Thursday, the 8th. Don't miss Mike in his presentation. And we're always glad to have you on the show. Mike, one more question, because my inquiring mind wants to know. Suppose you were coming from Baltimore by steamship up to Frenchtown, and then took the railroad to Newcastle, and then from Newcastle another steamship to Philly. How long do you think that would take?
Oh, that was about a 14-hour journey. It was a long time. I mean, these are primitive sailboats. The train only goes like 14 miles an hour or something like that. So it's and then you still got to unload it and unload it. So you spend the better part of a good long day by the time you make the connections and things like that.
And by the time you got to Frenchtown, you'd be pretty hungry.
You were. So the Frenchtown Tavern, I think it was our 5-star tavern back in those days.
Wow.
And you might stay a little too long and miss the train.
Yeah, I'll be one tomorrow.
You know, there'll be one in the afternoon. There were 2 a day. You know, it wasn't a lot of traffic, and they actually connected it with the steamboat coaches. But yeah, you had yourself a nice hospitality spot, nice food, nice drink, and a nice evening on the Elk River.
You know, thanks for taking us back into time, Mike. And it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Our viewers, visit the Cecil County Historical Society on Main Street in Elkton. Open every first Friday for a little celebration, right? It's a good time to check it out.
Monday and Thursday for research, if you want to come in and do some research. We're open from 10 to 4 on Mondays and Thursdays, and we have a great group of volunteers just eager to help you dig up that family history.
Amen. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you.